For 6 years, I drove Route 47. The route wasn't special. It ran from the downtown transit center through the industrial district, crossed the river, looped through several residential neighborhoods, and ended at a shopping center on the far side of town. It was the kind of route most drivers could practically do in their sleep. Same streets, same traffic lights, same stops every day. The first strange thing happened on a rainy Thursday in November. The weather had been awful all day, and by the time my shift was winding down, visibility had dropped to almost nothing. Most people had already gotten home before the worst of the storm arrived. Around midnight, I was making my final loop before heading back to the depot. Only 3 passengers remained on the bus: a college kid wearing headphones, an older woman carrying several bags of groceries, and a man sitting all the way in the back. I didn't remember seeing the man board. That wasn't necessarily unusual. Drivers miss things all the time when they're watching traffic, collecting fares, or dealing with passengers. What caught my attention was that he never moved. Every time I checked the rearview mirror, he sat in exactly the same position. His hands rested in his lap. His posture never changed. He wasn't looking out the window or scrolling through a phone. He simply stared straight ahead. The route continued normally until I reached Maple Street. The older woman exited first. Several stops later, the college kid stepped off as well. Suddenly, it was just me and the man in the back. I glanced in the mirror again. He was still there. A few minutes later, I reached the final stop. The shopping center was closed for the night, and the parking lot was completely empty. I pulled into the turnaround area and opened the doors. "Last stop," I called. The man didn't react. I repeated myself louder. Still nothing. Finally, annoyed, I set the parking brake and walked down the aisle. When I reached the back of the bus, the seat was empty. I stopped and looked around. The man was gone. The bus had only one exit, and I would have seen anyone leave. Yet there was nobody there. I searched the entire vehicle. Every seat, every corner. Nothing. No passenger, no bag, no sign that anyone had been sitting there at all. The next day, I mostly forgot about it. At least I tried to. The following week, it happened again. Same route, same late night shift, same terrible weather. Just after midnight, I checked the mirror and saw the man sitting in the exact same seat. He wore the same dark jacket, the same work boots. He sat with the same expressionless stare. This time I knew for certain he hadn't boarded. I had been paying attention at every stop. Yet there he was. When I reached the end of the route and walked back to confront him, he vanished exactly as before. By the third appearance, I started asking questions around the depot. Most of the drivers laughed it off. One older driver didn't. The moment I described the man, he became visibly uncomfortable. After a long silence, he asked me a question. "Does he sit on the left side near the back?" When I nodded, the color drained from his face. He got up and walked away without another word. A few days later, I cornered him in the break room and finally convinced him to explain. 20 years earlier, Route 47 had followed a slightly different path through the industrial district. One night, a driver named Carl was operating the last run when a drunk driver blew through a red light and slammed into the bus. Several passengers were killed instantly. One of the victims had been a factory worker heading home after a double shift. According to the accident report, his body had been found in the rear left section of the bus, the exact seat my mysterious passenger occupied. I wasn't convinced. Every workplace develops ghost stories eventually. Bus depots are no exception. Still, I found myself paying closer attention. The next time the man appeared, I studied him carefully through the mirror. He looked completely ordinary. Middle-aged, short hair, work boots, dark jacket. The only thing unusual was his expression. He looked sad. Not angry, not frightening, just deeply sad. The expression never changed. Weeks passed and things became stranger. One night I noticed the man wasn't alone anymore. A woman sat beside him. I had never seen her before. She looked nervous and exhausted. Neither passenger moved for the entire ride. When I reached the final stop and walked toward them, both vanished. Over the following weeks, more passengers began appearing. 3 one night, 4 the next, then 6. They always appeared without boarding and disappeared before I could reach them. By Christmas, nearly half the back of the bus would sometimes be occupied, but nobody ever spoke and none acknowledged me. They simply sat there. What bothered me most was the look on their faces. Every single one appeared exhausted, defeated, and anxious. They looked like people waiting for bad news they already knew was coming. Eventually, I stopped telling coworkers. Nobody believed me anyway. Then came January 17th. A heavy fog had settled over the city after sunset. By midnight, visibility had dropped so low that even streetlights looked distant and blurry. I was halfway through the route when I checked the mirror and nearly hit the brakes. Every seat in the rear half of the bus was occupied. At least 20 passengers sat silently behind me. The atmosphere inside the bus felt different. The normal rattles and vibrations seemed muted somehow. Everything felt unnaturally quiet. A few blocks later, the stop request bell rang. The sound nearly made me jump out of my seat. For months, these passengers had never interacted with anything. They never moved. They never spoke. Yet someone had requested a stop. The illuminated sign above me lit up. Stop requested. I pulled over automatically and opened the doors. Nobody got off. The passengers remained perfectly still. Then the bell rang again, and again, and again. The sound echoed through the bus relentlessly. When I looked into the mirror, every passenger was staring directly at me. For the first time, they weren't looking forward. They were looking at me. A chill ran down my spine. One passenger slowly raised an arm and pointed toward the windshield. I turned my attention back to the road. A city bus sat directly ahead in the middle of the intersection. Its lights were off, its engine appeared dead. The vehicle blocked the entire road. I slammed on the brakes. The bus stopped less than 10 feet away. Through the fog, I could tell something was wrong. The paint scheme looked outdated, old, like something from decades ago. Then I saw the route number, 47. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just another bus. It was the old Route 47, the same route involved in the fatal crash 20 years earlier. The vehicle sat motionless in the fog. Every window was dark. Every seat appeared occupied. Standing beside it was a man wearing a transit uniform. As the fog shifted, I recognized him immediately. Carl, the driver who had died in the crash. I recognized him from an employee photograph hanging in the depot. He wasn't looking at his own bus. He was looking directly at mine. Then he slowly shook his head. Just once. Immediately, the stop request bell began ringing nonstop. When I looked into the mirror, every passenger had stood up. Every one of them pointed toward a side street branching off from the intersection. Without thinking, I turned the wheel. The bus lurched down the side road. Seconds later, a tractor trailer exploded through the intersection at full speed. The driver never touched the brakes. The truck tore through the exact spot where my bus would have been. Had I continued straight, the collision would have been catastrophic. The truck disappeared into the fog. I sat frozen behind the wheel, struggling to breathe. When I finally looked back toward the intersection, the old bus was gone. Carl was gone. The road was completely empty. I checked the mirror. Every passenger had disappeared. The bus was empty. The next morning, police reports confirmed that a truck driver had suffered a medical emergency and lost control of his vehicle near the industrial district around the exact time of the incident. Investigators later stated that anything entering that intersection would almost certainly have been struck. I never told management what happened. Who would have believed me? But something changed after that night. The passengers still appear occasionally. Not often, and never in large numbers anymore. Usually it's only 1 or 2. The man in the back seat still shows up every few months. He always wears the same jacket and work boots. He always sits in the same seat. But now, whenever I catch sight of him in the mirror, he isn't staring sadly into the distance. He's smiling, and every time I reach the final stop and turn around to look, he's gone.